Welcome to Mysterium, where we taste the wonder and mystery of all of this. What is this? This video is part 2 of the series on imaginal perception. Originally, I intended to explore the lens in this video, but I sense that it'll be worthwhile to take a detour through imagination itself. I've realized that imagination seems to be central to our experience and understanding of the world, each other, and ourselves. I'm not sure if it's actually reflective of reality, but it seems to fit my phenomenological experience. And so I invite you to test it against your experience as we go. Presently, I personally find it quite insightful, but that's just me. By the end of this video, I hope to convey that imagination is central to our being, and most of our imagination is unconscious, and that similar to lucid dreaming, by becoming aware of our unconscious imagination and shifting to conscious imagination, we can begin to open ourselves up to the depths of our own potential and of reality. Let's begin with a definition of imagination that I've put together. Imagination presences what is absent to our senses. It can make you feel as if insects are crawling on the back of your neck and along your arms, when the insects aren't actually there. Imagination does this by drawing from the full range of our experience and understanding, both conscious and unconscious. And these can be synthesized to create newly imagined possibilities. If you'd like, we can test this out through an imaginative exercise, but first we'll have to slow down. Gently close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Exhale slowly. Relax your face, jaw, shoulders, chest, stomach, legs, and feet. Now bring your attention to the center left side of your chest, your heart. Imagine someone who you love deeply and is not in your immediate proximity. Non-human animals are welcome. If no one comes to mind, imagine your favorite food and adjust the following prompts accordingly. Can you see an impression of their face? Hear the faint echo of their voice? Perhaps feel their touch? Smell their scent? Invoke memories of them? Can you feel their distinct presence as if they were beside you? Do you feel something towards these imaginings? You can open your eyes. Did you experience anything? Your eyes were closed and your loved one was not physically near. Yet you had an experience of some part of them and you might have felt something towards your imaginings, or perhaps even felt their presence. If you felt their presence, that's your imagination presencing your entire relationship with them in their absence. All the accumulated experiences, the tender moments, the specific quality of how they make you feel, imagination gathered all of that and made it present to you here, now. And notice, each and every detail didn't have to be imagined piece by piece. Rather, the imaginings spontaneously came as wholes. You gave your imagination a gentle intention and it carried out the rest. In fact, it might have even been unconscious, As in, my prompt was sufficient to stir your imagination, and so you didn't have to consciously intend to imagine any of the specifics I had asked you. All of that happened without much effort. Perhaps the effortlessness suggests that imagination is intrinsic to our experience. Let's turn to dreams to see the full force of our unconscious imagination. Can you remember your most vivid dream? They were complete worlds with their own physics and presence, an unfolding narrative and setting of people, beings, things, landscapes, and interactions, all without any conscious effort and real sensory perceptions. More often than not, we're unaware that we're dreaming, without a hint of doubt, as if we're out and about on any other day and didn't just get teleported to some place after falling asleep. Dreams can be bizarre and unrealistic, but we'll still often find ourselves fully bought into what's happening and behave as if it's entirely real. Our bodies respond physically, emotions surge, sensations are felt, and we can wake up with sadness weighing on us and tears in our eyes. Dreams demonstrate that unconscious imagination can create experiential worlds, but most importantly, it tells us that we are easily steered by our own unconscious imagination. Intriguingly, sometimes we can get lucky and gain full awareness in a dream and break free from its grip. Here, we can begin to lucid dream and control the dream according to our conscious imagination. If I want to fly into space with my superpowers and swallow the sun, I just need to consciously imagine that. Although I have ran into difficulties where my dream didn't cooperate. I believe there's a parallel to the phenomenon of lucid dreaming in waking life, but we'll come back to this later. Note, there's a condition called aphantasia, the inability to voluntarily create mental visualizations, and it affects about 4% of the general population. Fascinatingly, most of them still have visual dreams. Adam Zeman, the researcher who coined the condition, thinks that aphantasics have unconscious imagery, given that most do dream and they can easily differentiate between kinds of objects, suggesting that they do have a stored representation of things in their minds. So even though people with aphantasia can't consciously imagine visualizations, they may be doing so unconsciously. This reinforces just how fundamental and pervasive imagination is. It operates even when we can't consciously access it. Let's explore how imagination pervades waking life. Imagination allows us to simulate persons, beings, objects, ideas, and scenarios. And remember, in dreams, it can create entire worlds that we interact with and are affected by. These imaginings, or simulations, have presence and realness to them, since they can impress upon us, influence us, and affect our understanding. Imagination reveals and creates, and it functions unconsciously and consciously. Imagination doesn't seem to be merely a peripheral function, but rather one that is central to our experience. Operating largely beneath awareness, imagination is what makes meaning possible. For all that enters our sense perceptions, they alone do not contain our beliefs about them and what they mean to us. In particular, our unconscious imagination seems to synthesize our past experience, understanding, and often unconsciously predicted or simulated futures into the full and seamless experience of the present moment. This seems to align with predictive processing, a leading theory in cognitive science that tells us the brain is always generating predictions or simulations of the world. What predictive processing describes conceptually, I believe, we experience phenomenologically as imagination. We are constantly imagining. We're unable to perceive the multi-aspectuality and depths of reality from our single and constrained vantage point. And so, drawing from our existence, imagination fills in whatever is absent to our perception. Consider a cube. Can we see all of its sides? No. but when we see it, we act as if it has all sides. Let's say that you see a door. You're already unconsciously imagining that something is behind that door because doors typically lead to somewhere else. How do we know? If you opened the door and saw a concrete wall, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised if the concrete street you were walking on gave out like a sheet of paper. If you found your fridge entirely filled with giant stones. Or if there was a polar bear in your closet. Our unconscious imagination fills in our perception with predictions. Predictions so seamless we don't notice them until reality violates our expectations. All this imagining happens without any conscious effort, just like when you unconsciously dream of complete worlds. It seems that imagination reveals our relations to our perceptions, relations that have been shaped and formed through our experience and understanding. It's revelatory in that it shows us how we've come to relate to things based on our unfolding existence. Language demonstrates this phenomenon clearly. When looking at written language that's entirely foreign to us, the writing doesn't convey much, if anything. However, if we are fluent in the written language, we can't help but have impressed upon us the relations that we have to these symbols, whether that be images, concepts, feelings, predictions, memories, or otherwise. Gather enough of these symbols onto pages and into a series of thick books, and you can create an entire world that has its own history and distinct presence. You can't help but give meaning to the words that you're hearing right now, and it's a bit uncanny how seamless the experience is from hearing to understanding. But as soon as you come across crepuscent, the seamlessness is lost. But after I tell you that crepuscent is a word I just made up and that you don't have to care about it, the seamlessness returns. Crepuscent. In a way, all that enters our perceptions are pointers into our psyches, and our unconscious imagination reveals the relations that we have formed with them. It reveals more about us than it does about reality. A person could be extremely judgmental towards a drug addict, or they could wonder about the often traumatic story behind the human. They could see themselves as a failure who needs to be commandeered, or they could see themselves as someone who needs the support of a parent that they never had and take on that role for themselves. They could see the sun just as a source of light and energy because of their focus on utility, or they could feel a relationship with the sun because of how integral stars are to the existence of nearly everything. Note: a dualistic either-or perspective alone is incomplete since reality encompasses both either-or and both-and. Given reality's depths and multi-aspectuality, the flexibility of our imagination is fitting. An evolving comprehension developed through conscious imagination is the closest we'll get as an individual and collective in our reaching towards such a profound, grand, and mysterious reality. Let's now return to the parallel between lucid dreaming and waking life. We did not choose much of our formative experiences and understanding, and so, similar to a dream, our unconscious imagination, having been given form by our upbringing, or lack thereof, may be steering fundamental aspects of our lives, such as how we relate to ourselves, others, and the world, and these patterns may be dysfunctional, incomplete, or incongruent with reality. Soaking up the ways of imagining of our surroundings is a necessary part of development and often necessary for survival. However, in order to actually live and discover our potential, we must become aware of our unconscious imagination and begin to consciously imagine, to create by reimagining relations and transforming our interactions. Shifting from unconscious ways of relating that no longer serve us, that induce fear, anger, or anxiety, and hold back our relationships to ourselves, others, and the world, towards imagining ways of relating that complexify us, support our flourishing, and make us become alive. Evidence shows us that conscious imagination can heal internal conflicts and traumas. We'll be looking at two modalities of therapy that involve conscious imagination. The first modality is imaginal exposure, developed in 1958 by Joseph Wolpe and recognized by the American Psychological Association. If you're not familiar with exposure therapy, in order to heal a person's conditioned fear response and avoidance patterns, the person can be exposed to the actual stimulus, let's say a spider, in a safe and controlled setting. Over time and through repeated exposure, as they learn that their worst unconsciously imagined prediction is not realistic, their fear becomes attenuated or potentially extinguished. When the actual stimulus is unavailable or not feasible, let's say a husband who is extremely jealous when his wife speaks to other men, imaginal exposure is an effective substitute where the person will imagine the stimulus instead. Fascinatingly, in a 2018 study titled Attenuating Neural Threat Expression with Imagination, researchers recorded the brain activity and sweat response of participants and found that imaginal exposure was as effective as real exposure in reducing threat response, both neurologically and physiologically. Marianne Redden, the lead author, described her study as, quote, the first neuroscience study to show that imagining a threat can actually alter the way it is represented in the brain, end quote. Her study showed that, quote, statistically, real and imaginal exposure to the threat were not different at the whole brain level, and imagination worked just as well, end quote. The second modality is a psychotherapy that's been gaining popularity in the past 5 years called Internal Family Systems, IFS, developed by Richard Schwartz in the 1980s. IFS holds that all parts are welcome and gets us to consciously imagine our psyche as composed of parts that are differentiated and personified into two major categories, protectors and exiles. And in a healthy system, they are integrated and led by the self, with a capital S. For example, the workaholic could be protecting you from feelings of worthlessness that the exile is carrying. This is a highly imaginative and creative practice. We often only have a felt sense as our foundation to work with, an emotionally laden internal sensation. Through attention on these sensations paired with dialogue, visualization, and externalization methods such as art, our conscious imagination fills in, reveals, and presences our parts. The presencing of our psyche's parts allows us to develop an intimate relationship with ourselves and begin the process of healing and integration. We are complexifying ourselves in the process of differentiating our originally undifferentiated psyche into parts and integrating them. A 2025 scoping review found that IFS shows promise particularly for chronic pain, depression, PTSD, and developing self-compassion and self-forgiveness, though the author notes that more research is needed to fully establish its effectiveness. These therapeutic modalities demonstrate that by reimagining how we relate to others and ourselves, we can heal and release our burdens, improving our well-being. Our ability to heal ourselves may be limited by how creative we will allow ourselves to be. And it seems that the further we have to reach into our own depths, the more creative we will have to be. It may require attention, dialogue, visualization, and externalization through a ritual to heal our most burdened parts. Carl Jung's quote feels fitting here. No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. What's been helping me in becoming aware of my unconscious imagination is paying attention to my internal bodily sensations, feeling them, and dialoguing with them. From my experience, psychological states and thoughts, fear, anxiety, anger, shame, guilt, instinctual drives, correspond to internal sensations, and they vary in how subtle or obvious they are. I practice noticing the contractions in my chest, jaw, neck, gut, feet, breathing, anywhere in my body really. So when I notice and feel a contraction in my chest during a conversation, I may think to myself, something's bothering me. Am I acting defensively? Or when I'm having anxious thoughts, I may notice that my body is tense and begin to relax my body. In both examples, I'd likely be chest breathing rather than diaphragmatic breathing, and could switch to the latter to help with relaxation. Considering that our experiences are always infused with and dripping in imagination, the problem isn't imagination itself. It's unconscious imagination running amok without our awareness. Analogous to the driving force of unconscious imagination in dreams, where we're in its grips despite the absurdity, the unconscious imagination that we've soaked up through our experiences may be dysfunctional and not conducive to our flourishing as deeply embedded beings within and of the cosmos, and we may not even realize it. Much of what truly matters to us is not perceptible to these senses alone, and is given presence by our imagination. Our imagination alters our internal world and the external world. Just look at all that we've created and the ways that we've altered Earth's landscapes. Imagination is ubiquitous. What and how we imagine matters. Choosing to consciously imagine matters, lest we live the dreams not of our own imagination. In our choosing, we become participants in this grand and profoundly mysterious unfolding. Here are two more insightful quotes by Jung that I've combined into one. Quote, "Projections of our own shadow change the world into the replica of one's own unknown face. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." End quote. I really do wonder, what could happen if we reimagine our relation to reality so that it is in alignment with reality's fundamental nature? In the next video, we'll explore imaginal perception. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Take care.